Alright, what is good, what is happening everybody, it's your boy Primitive AK here, back with another video for you guys. Today we are going to be going over the overall best settings to be using for the Black Ops 7 beta. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe. Appreciate you guys showing the love and support. As always, I'm very excited to finally get some hands-on with this game, so we'll be showcasing what we have to show for our settings. So I've currently played about 2 matches playing around with these settings, and while they could still use some tweaking, I think there's a lot that you guys can learn from the settings that I have here, but I will still be tweaking things like sensitivity, so that way I can kind of find the sweet spot on this game, because there is quite a lot of complex stuff going on here, and unfortunately a lot of the stuff from the previous games did not carry over to the beta, which is to be expected. You know, no complaints there, but just don't expect settings from other games to carry over. So let's get right into it. So I'm going to start with controller settings, since that's kind of like the most important things that you guys kind of care about here. So stick default and button layout I have set to default. The reason why I have this is because I do have a 4-paddle scuff controller. So this allows me to access buttons that are usually on the right side of the controller in the back of my controller, so I don't have to change any of these settings. However, if you don't have a scuff controller, I would change your button layout preset to tactical. That way you can move your melee weapon over to the right hand area, and that will allow you to do a little bit of extra stuff here. Tactical's been the staple in Call of Duty for quite some time, so you definitely want to make sure you're using that if you don't have a scuff. Horizontal and vertical sensitivity. This you're going to have to play around with a lot, and unfortunately, like I said, this number is probably going to change over time. It starts by default at 1.2. Now I have absolutely no idea what 1.2 is when you convert that to the previous Call of Duties, but it's definitely not the same, I can tell you that much. So I actually had to turn this up to 1.4, and it felt a little bit better. I got like a 50 bomb first game, but it still didn't feel 100%. It almost even felt like my controller had some delay when I was using this, but again, that's something that I'm gonna have to play around with more. Simplify controls preset, leave that off. All these settings leave to off, and then swap L1 and R2. You can use this if you prefer your fire buttons on the L2 and L1 sticks. However, I prefer to just leave it on default. Vibration, always turn your vibration off. You don't need it. There's no point of it. Trigger effect, turn this off as well. This is mostly for like the trigger, like it makes your trigger feel like the actual gun trigger. Just turn it off. It's for a realistic type thing. Dead zone, this is pretty important. Now, if you have 0 stick drift whatsoever, do not set this any higher than 1. This goes for your left and right stick minimum output. Set this to 1 because that means that you'll get instant output. You could even go down to 0 if you really want to. I just leave it on 1 just for, like, you know, if shit happens kind of thing. But I leave this on 1. Left stick max set to 99 and right stick max set to 99 as well. Left and right triggers, again, if you don't have any stick drift or button delays on your controller, I have mouse click triggers on my controller, so it literally is like a mouse click. So that's why I set this to 1. You could even set this down to 0 if you prefer, but by default these are all set to 13, so that's why you want to make sure you're turning this down so that way there's no delay whatsoever there. Moving on to aiming, sensitivity multiplier. I kind of leave this as is. I don't really use any of these things. You could change your ADS sensitivity multiplier down to like 0.9 if you really want to, and then maybe turn up your actual stick sensitivity to like maybe 1.5. That might help you out there. Like I said, I have to play around with this more before I can actually figure out what this does. But when you're ADSing, this will essentially reduce your aim down sight speed to 0.9% of whatever this value is. Like I said, the other ones really aren't that important because there are no air vehicles right now and there's no ground vehicles, and we're not playing third person right now, but just change those for sure. And then focus as well. This is for when you're sniping. When you're focused up, you'll probably want to put this down to 0.9 as well, so definitely have that there. Look aversion, I have this all set to standard. I don't change any of these settings. Aim advanced settings, transition aiming, I set this to usually gradual. I don't usually change that too much. I think I will have to play around with this a little bit more to understand this. Aim response curve, I set this to standard. Some people say go linear or dynamic, but I used to dabble with these back in NW 2019, but I realized like it doesn't really mean that much to me, so that's why I decided to just leave it as is. Custom sensitivity per zoom. This is so that way if you're using a 2x or a 3x scope, this will allow you to change the sensitivity of those scopes. However, I don't really use different scopes. I usually use 1.0 scopes, so that's why I just keep this as is. And like I said, we already changed that with the other settings, so you don't really need to change that at all. Target assist, obviously on. Motion sensor function behavior, just leave that off. You don't need it. Movement. Sprint assist, I have this set to tac sprint assist. I believe you could put this to just regular, so it'll just do regular sprint, but if you want tac assist sprint, you could put this on. Sprint delay, always have that to 0. And then sideways and backwards, I always turn that on as well. Mantle assist, I don't recommend using this. Not really a good thing to use, just because you'll run into a lot of things and you'll end up mantling on objects that you probably didn't mean to mantle on. Crouch assist, I don't use it. Corner slice, this is so that way when you ADS at a corner of a wall, it'll actually tilt instead. So definitely, I usually leave that on, but if you don't use it, you can just turn it off, but I like to use it. Wall jump assist, I might turn this on at a future date, but for now, I think I'm just going to leave it off. I have to play around with it more, and plus I have to learn the movement a bit. Slide behavior, it's always set tap to slide, so that way you don't have to hold it. Delay, always set it to short. Automatic airborne mantle, and sprint resist, I'll leave all these on. You don't need to touch any of those. The rest of these, I just kind of leave as is. Movement advanced settings. Sprint assist, toggle behavior, I always set the toggle. Auto move forward. I would just leave this as is. Auto door peek, I have this off currently. These are the similar settings that we've had in other games, so that's why I just kind of leave it there. Moving on to vehicle behaviors, you can't touch that. There's no vehicles in the game, so I'm going to skip that. Aim down sight, always on. Most of these should be set to default, so you don't really have to change any of these. But if they're not set to default for whatever reason, you can just go ahead and copy the settings that I have here. Moving on, combat advanced settings. I just kind of have this all as default. You can play around with some of this stuff. I don't feel the need to change any of these things. Scoreboard, map assist behavior, I set to toggle. And then overlay advanced settings. I recommend setting inventory control, directional buttons, pinwheel delay, moderate, and default. So that's pretty much for your combat and overall just controller settings there. We're going to go on over to graphics settings. I'm not covering M and K because, you know, if you're M and K, chances are you probably already have the best M and K settings there. So I'm going to go over to graphics for anyone on PC. This is pretty important here. So I want to make it very clear. My settings will likely be different from yours because I have a very beefy PC. My PC can handle a lot more than the next person, so you may not be able to have the same settings I have. But regardless, for those that don't know, I have an RTX 4090, so my GPU is very good. My CPU is very good. I've got an i9 processor, 13th gen. So that's why I'm able to kind of do this whole thing here. I set it to full screen borderless. The only reason I set this to full screen borderless is because I do have 4 monitors, and I need to be able to switch between those monitors, especially when I'm making videos like the one you're watching right now. This allows me to kind of tab in and out as much as I need to without having to worry about the game doing all types of weird things. And everything else here is set to default. I don't change any of this stuff. You don't have the VSync menus. I just do it so that way it leaves it a little more stable. Custom frame rate limit. I leave this all to default. HDR is on by default. I recommend you turn it off. You definitely have to turn that off. Graphics preset, I actually have this set to custom, and the reason why is because I'm using the upscale sharpening, which is fidelity cast. This allows me to turn down the render resolution down to 2K because this will default to 4K because of my graphics card. And personally, I don't want to play this game at 4K. I want to have as many frames as possible, especially when I'm playing super competitive shooters like this one. So that's why you definitely want to make sure that you have that, and bring this down to 2K if it's set to 4K. Fidelity cast strength. Like I said, I gotta play with this more. I think this is supposed to be at 100, but I'm not too sure on that one. I'm just gonna leave it on 50 for now, and then once I learn a little bit more about this setting, I'll probably set it to whatever it needs to be set to. Frame gen, this is a newer setting for 40 series cards and higher. I actually turned this on. It actually does a really good job, and that's why I recommend if you do have a 40 series card, give it a shot. I think you're going to like it. A lot of people say, oh, you know, it's fake frames. It's not fake frames, guys. Please understand what this thing actually does. It's not giving you fake frames. It's just helping rebuild them, essentially. VRAM scale, I set that to 70. Variable rate shading on as well. I have my texture resolution set to high since I'm not playing at 4K. I can turn these up a lot more. I'm not going to go through every single one. I'm just going to kind of scroll through it, and you guys can copy whatever you want to copy if you have similar PC stats as mine. Otherwise, I would recommend turning this down as much as possible. Probably just set it all to low, and then set your main graphics to the highest setting. Oh, it just kicked me out of the menu. I'm not sure why. But like I said, it really just depends on your PC. You're going to have to kind of know your hardware here, and that way you'll be able to have some decent settings. But like I said, I have good hardware, so I set all this to high so that way I can kind of see as much as I can. Overall view. Oh, and most importantly, almost forgot. Let's see, where is the setting? I almost forgot where it is. I think it's in view. Yeah, it's in view. All right, so motion reduction preset. Set that to off. Arachnophobia, if you're afraid of spiders, turn it off, but there's no spiders yet. Field of view, I always set this to 105. You can go 110, but I think Call of Duty has a really solid spot of 105, so that's why I decided to leave that there. ADS field of view, affected, weapon field of view, default, third person field of view, 90, and vehicle default. Motion blur, turn this off. You don't need it. I say this every time I make a settings video. You just don't need it. Turn it off. Camera movement, this is essentially your camera shake. I wish they would just let us turn this off. For some reason, they just don't let us turn it off. But just set it to the lowest value, 50%. That should be more than enough to get the job done. Third person ADS transition, set this to, default. And then invert flashbang, this will make it so that way you get a low light black effect instead of the white effect. So I turn this on. And overall, for the most part, that's pretty much it for the graphics settings. We'll move on over to audio settings. My speaker's default communications device, or my default system device, should be the Arctis Pro Wireless, which is my headset. But just in case, we'll set it to the headset just in case it's doing some weird things. Stereo, I always set the stereo. Audio mix, I would put this on bass boost if you have a good headset. That's just my opinion. I actually forgot to change that, so that's why I'm changing it now. Mute gain when minimize. You can do this. These are just more or less, personal settings here. You can play around with it, figure out what works best for you. Hit marker preset. You can set this to either default or classic. This will set it to the old school Black Ops settings, but I actually like the hit marker sounds in this game, so I'm going to leave it as is. Voice chat volume, I'm going to set this to 25 for now. Now, this setting actually carried over from the previous COD. It's funny because I did set this to 25 in the other COD, but it didn't carry any of my other settings, which is weird. Microphone level, I have a very sensitive mic, but I'm going to boost that up to 40 so I can talk shit. Push to talk, I set this to my Z key, so that way I'm not open mic all the time. My voice chat output device is going to go through my Arctis Pro Wireless chat setting. I have 2 separate channels for my headset, so we're going to set that to chat. And then the rest of this should be good. Microphone input should be my Wave 3. That's my studio mic, which is the mic that I'm currently using to commentate this video. And that should be it. So anyways, guys, that should be it for all of your settings. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Thank you for all the love and support as always. If there's any questions that you guys have regarding these settings, or if you have any recommendations for your fellow viewers in the comments box down below as to the best settings to use in Black Ops 7, let me know in the comments box down below. I'll be sure to reply to as many comments as I can. Thank you guys for all the love and support. And I will have some more videos up later today showcasing best in-slot attachments and class setups and overall best tips to succeed on the Black Ops 7 beta. Thank you guys for all the love, and I'll catch you guys later. It's your boy Primitive AK, signing out. Peace out, fellas.